and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. The Taliban say there won't be peace in Afghanistan until President Ashraf is removed. In an interview, spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said there must be an agreement on a new government before any ceasefire. China says the U.S. is slandering its efforts to pursue criminal suspects overseas. In a briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian urged Washington to correct its mistakes. This comes after a Chinese prosecutor was charged in an alleged plot to intimidate citizens to return. In India, at least 36 people have been killed after monsoon season floods triggered landslides in the western Indian state of Maharashtra. Authorities say the landslides and flooding cut off hundreds of villages in low-lying areas. Brazil has registered more than 1,400 new COVID-19 deaths and nearly 50,000 new cases overnight. In Pakistan, the virus has claimed 11 lives and infected more than 1,400 people in the past 24 hours. Globally, there are more than 4.1 million fatalities and over 192 million cases so far. Tokyo Olympics have finally kicked off with a spectacular opening ceremony. Athletes from more than 200 countries parade with flags through the stadium. Meanwhile, hundreds of people staged a protest outside the venue, calling for the cancellation of games amid the growing COVID-19 crisis. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. The Taliban say there won't be peace in Afghanistan until President Ashraf is removed. In an interview, spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said there must be an agreement on a new government before any ceasefire. However, Shaheen rejected the notion that the Taliban want to monopolize power. He called Ghani a warmonger, accusing him of using his Eid speech to promise an offensive. Shaheen dismissed the Afghan president's right to govern amid allegations of widespread fraud in the 2019 election. Earlier, the group said it will stick to its policy on peace despite being in a strong military position. The Taliban say the recent U.S. airstrikes violated Doha deal. Spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said Washington will be responsible for the consequences if it conducts further operations. In a statement, Mujahid confirmed that 3 fighters were killed in the raids on the outskirts of Kandahar. Earlier, Pentagon said the raids show Washington's commitment to helping the Afghan forces. Meanwhile, Kabul says the Taliban claim of controlling 90% of the Afghan border is an absolute lie. However, the Taliban say they have captured the Ghaziabad district of Kunar province and arrested 140 government soldiers. China says the U.S. is slandering its efforts to pursue criminal suspects overseas. In a briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian urged Washington to correct its mistakes. This comes after a Chinese prosecutor was charged in an alleged plot to intimidate citizens to return. The Justice Department accused him of traveling to the U.S. to direct a harassment campaign. Tulan is the latest defendant in a sprawling investigation that has led to charges against 9 people. Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Kashmir Sopore town. The Kashmiris were targeted during a night-long operation in the Varpora area. The forces have also suspended internet services in the area. Indian occupying forces have killed more than 400 civilians since the revocation of the occupied valley's special status. Pakistan has slammed India's state-sponsored and widespread surveillance and spying operations. Islamabad said it is monitoring the situation and will highlight Indian abuses at appropriate global platforms.
In a statement, the Foreign Office said such actions breach global norms of responsible state behavior. It said Pakistan notes with serious concern recent international media reports exposing India's activities. Islamabad says Delhi is organizing a spying operation against its citizens and foreigners. The Foreign Office said India also targeted Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan using Israeli-origin spyware. It said Delhi silences dissent to commit rights abuses in occupied Kashmir and peddled disinformation against Islamabad.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi will be visiting China today at the invitation of his counterpart Wang Yi. The Foreign Office says they will discuss CPEC, defense and security cooperation, COVID-19 vaccines and counter-terrorism. It said the visit will boost the all-weather bilateral partnership. The two-day visit is part of the celebrations for the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. More than 100 events have been planned, over 60 of which have been held so far. Turkish authorities have held 27 Afghan migrants after they entered the country illegally. State media says the refugees include 8 children. It said they were detained in the eastern Erzincan province after police launched a campaign against human smuggling. The state media said all refugees were taken to the police headquarters for routine procedures. It said they will later be transferred to the local migration authorities. In India, at least 36 people have been killed after monsoon season floods triggered landslides in the western state of Maharashtra. Authorities say the landslides and flooding cut off hundreds of villages in low-lying areas. Rescuers have been recovering bodies from under debris, but more people are feared missing. The search and rescue operations have also been hampered by heavy downpours and foggy conditions. The state is experiencing its heaviest monsoon season in July in 40 years, which experts say is a direct result of climate change. More than 30 people have died in Mumbai over the past week due to landslides caused by heavy downpours. Pakistan's coronavirus tally has crossed 1 million, with 1,400 cases reported overnight. The health ministry says the virus has claimed 11 more lives in the past 24 hours. Officials say the death toll is approaching 23,000. They say more than 923,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. Pakistan's positivity rate stands at 5.65% after people celebrated Eid al-Adha. There are more than 53,000 cases active, with 2,500 critical. Brazil has registered more than 1,400 new COVID-19 deaths and nearly 50,000 cases overnight. Globally, there are more than 4.1 million fatalities and over 192 million cases. More in this report.
Experts believe following SOPs such as wearing masks and social distancing are as important as vaccines, as none of them alone can prevent the spread of COVID-19. Argentina is one of the first countries to widely use Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. It has ratcheted up pressure on Moscow over delays in the arrival of second doses. Meanwhile, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has not revised its mask guidance, even as the Delta variant sweeps the country. Doctors are worried the current surge will ultimately be worse than the 2020 crisis.
Starting really the 1st of June, we saw an escalation in our inpatient COVID admissions, and that probably the most alarming part in the beginning. It happened very fast. So we marked our surge last year, really started around September 1st, and the peak hit December 28th. So 150 days to span that from about 24 to 113. We crossed that same number in 36 days this year.
EU countries have so far donated just a tiny portion of excess vaccines to poor nations, mostly AstraZeneca shots. France's COVID advisor to the government says the 4th wave of infections will hit hospitals in the second half of August. Meanwhile, Greece says all unvaccinated restaurant and tourism workers nationwide must undergo regular COVID-19 tests. Daily contact testing will be rolled out to workplaces in Britain's food sector. Staff pinged by the COVID-19 app will keep working if they test negative rather than isolating. Over in Australia, the largest state of New South Wales has urged the federal government to divert vaccine doses to Sydney. The state has also reported the biggest daily rise in new COVID-19 cases this year, prompting a national emergency. Neighbouring New Zealand will pause quarantine-free travel with Australia for at least 8 weeks over the outbreak of the Delta variant there.
There is greater risk now from the Delta variant than there was when we opened the quarantine-free travel arrangement with Australia. It is the government's duty to keep New Zealanders safe from COVID-19, and we continue to believe that the strongest health response is also the strongest economic response. This approach has served us well to date. So too is our willingness to adapt. COVID has changed, and so we must.
The Philippines will ban travelers coming from Malaysia and Thailand. It will also tighten restrictions in the Manila area in a bid to prevent the spread of the contagious Delta variant.
Israeli occupation forces have detained 8 Palestinians from multiple districts in the West Bank. The Palestinian Prisoner Society says those held include 4 people freed earlier from Israeli jails. The society said the Palestinians were arrested in Tibet city and the town of Tamim. The occupation forces set up several checkpoints in towns and villages to the south of Jenin. They also stormed the town of Beita, south of Nablus, leading to clashes. The forces fired tear gas and stun grenades towards the residents, injuring a youth in the mouth. UN says its former rights chief will lead an inquiry into abuses in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. A commission of inquiry is the highest level investigation that can be ordered by the Human Rights Council. The 3-person commission will investigate all underlying root causes of recurrent tensions. The council agreed to launch the investigation in May after Israel killed at least 250 Palestinians in the bombing on Gaza. UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has earlier said Israeli strikes on Gaza might constitute war crimes. The commission is set to report to the Human Rights Council each year from June 2022. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Cuban defense minister and other officials over a crackdown on anti-government protest. U.S. President Joe Biden said the sanctions are only the first step in the American response. He also condemned alleged mass detentions and sham trials in Cuba. Thousands of Cubans took to the streets a week ago in protest against the country's looming economic crisis. President Xi Jinping has visited the politically troubled region of Tibet, the first official visit by a Chinese leader in 30 years. President Xi, along with chairman of the Tibet Autonomous Region, Shea Dala, interacted with locals in capital Lhasa. He also visited the newly built Sichuan-Tibet Railway, which connects the city of Lhasa with the strategically important Ningxi. China says Tibet has developed considerably under its rule. In central China, authorities have stepped up recovery efforts in rain-battered Zhengzhou as floodwaters begin to recede. Rescuers are trying to reach the trapped and stranded in the deluged city of 12 million. Tens of thousands of rescue workers, including the military and volunteers, have been deployed across Henan province. Zhengzhou, the capital city of Henan province, is still immersed in waist-high water. At least 12 people died while being trapped in the city's inundated subway. Flooding has claimed 33 lives in the province over the days. Rescue professionals from neighboring provinces have been called in. A migrant boat carrying 45 people has sunk in the southeastern Aegean Sea. According to Turkey's defense ministry, the boat capsized about 60 miles south of the Greek island of Karpathos. The ministry said 36 refugees have been rescued while the search for others continues. It said 2 ships and 1 plane were involved in the rescue operation. Migrants were trying to cross the Aegean Sea from Turkey to Greece in the hopes of starting new lives in Europe. Ecuador has declared a state of emergency in its prison system after riots at 2 jails left 22 dead and 57 injured. President Guillermo Lasso issued the decree to mobilize all necessary resources to re-establish order. Lasso said the military would be in charge of controlling the prison perimeter and entry. Meanwhile, police officers would control the inside. Until now, civilians trained as prison guards were in charge of indoor security. Prison authorities earlier suspended all activities that could put the population and administrative personnel at risk. The G20 climate conference will resume today for a second and final day in Naples. Italy says the bloc has finally agreed to a communiqué on climate after weeks of negotiations and a two-day non-stop session. Ecological Minister Roberto Cingolani said the document covers food security, the sustainable use of water, and sustainable finance. The G20 meeting discussed biodiversity and the natural environment on Thursday. Meanwhile, energy and climate change will be on today's agenda. However, near the Royal Palace in Naples, thousands protested against the alleged lack of action on global warming. Earlier in a statement, the U.S. Treasury Secretary urged for mobilizing more capital to fight climate change. European stocks are trading cautiously higher as investors monitor a slew of economic data along with fresh corporate earnings. The CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB are leading the gains, rising closer to 1%. London's FTSE and the Pan-European Stock 600 also added more than 0.75%. Frankfurt's DAX advanced over 0.5%. The Tokyo Olympics have finally kicked off with a grand opening ceremony. Fewer than 1,000 people are in attendance amid strict social distancing rules at Tokyo's Olympic Stadium. Athletes from more than 200 countries parade with flags through the stadium, besides spectacular fireworks. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said over 4 billion people across the world will be watching the Olympic Games. Japanese Emperor Naruhito and U.S. First Lady Jill Biden among special guests. Meanwhile, hundreds have protested outside the venue against the staging of the event despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Australia and New Zealand have pulled out of the Rugby League World Cup because of COVID-19. The men's, women's and wheelchair events will take place in England this autumn. New Zealand Rugby League chief Greg Peters said it was simply too unsafe to take part. Peter termed the guarantees given by the league unsatisfactory. But Rugby Football League chairman Simon Johnson said the organisers offered every assurance to the Aussies and the Kiwis, calling the decision selfish, parochial and cowardly. Johnson said the organisers won't take it lying down. For the weather updates, we have Nala Shuja with us.
Thank you. We're going to be starting with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to be hot with temperatures rising to 44 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, the weather is cloudy with temperatures at 22 degrees Celsius. If we head to Ankara, the weather is pleasantly cloudy with temperatures at 28 degrees Celsius. Moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 15 degrees Celsius with some partial sun overhead. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, you must have an umbrella because there will be thunderstorms with temperatures around 31 degrees Celsius. While in Beijing, there is sunny weather in the forecast with temperatures at 32 degrees Celsius. While Beirut will also experience mostly sunny weather with temperatures at 32 degrees Celsius. Berliners will experience a bit of a cloudy day with temperatures at 24 degrees Celsius. Heading to Cairo, the sun will be out with 36 degrees Celsius temperature. Down under in Canberra, the rainy weather is keeping things chilly at 6 degrees Celsius. In Islamabad, some puffy clouds are hovering ahead with temperatures rising to 35 degrees Celsius. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 30 degrees Celsius with expected thunderstorms. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Nala. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.